Welcome to Handmade History.
Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Alicia.
And I'm Sonia.
And today we are talking about printmaking machines, including the mimeograph, the Gocco machine, and the hectograph.
But first, we have two exciting announcements. This episode is brought to you by our Patreon page.
Yes, Patreon is a platform that allows people to directly support creators, and it is a way for you to support our podcast. You can sign up as a free or paid member.
On our Patreon page, which is at patreon.com/handmadehistorypodcast, we will be sharing public posts for every episode, which will be free to everyone. Right now, you can see posts for the episodes of Season 2.
These posts are very fun for me to write. I include a description of the episode, links to listen to it, and then links that are especially fun from our many sources. It's like a Cliff's Notes version of our show notes, with links so that you can easily explore more about each episode. And I also include photos. We would like to invite you to sign up for a free account so that you can get the posts in your inbox. We release one post per episode, and it will arrive in your inbox the same day that the episode drops. This is an easy way to find out when a new episode is live, especially if you aren't on social media.
If you'd like to do that, you can visit patreon.com/handmadehistorypodcast and click on Join for free. Thank you for considering.
Our second announcement is that we are launching a stitch-along and embroidery design. This is a very special collaboration with Melissa Galbraith of MCreativeJ. Together, we're creating an embroidery kit, pattern, and stitch-along. We're thrilled to bring handmade history to your fingertips and get to try it out together.
Melissa's specialty is beautiful botanical embroidery designs. Our collaboration kit is special because it will teach you how to get started with stumpwork. Stumpwork is embroidery that uses wires and padding to create three-dimensional elements. Our kit will include all of the supplies and tools that you will need to complete the Wild Pansy Stumpwork design. For those who already have plenty of floss materials, there will also be a PDF pattern, which will include the exact same pattern and directions as the full kit. In both the kit and PDF pattern, you will receive a special article all about stumpwork by Handmade History.
Pre-orders for kits and patterns open today. The kits and PDF pattern will be delivered in mid-February. You'll be able to participate in the weekly stitch-along all through March. And I know it sounds far away, but we're planning ahead to make spring as stitch-tacular as possible. Plus, we'll be embroidering right along with you. If you are interested in stitching with us and fellow Handmade History fans, you can visit our Patreon page to learn more or pre-order your very own kit or pattern at the link in our show notes. Okay, that was a super long introduction, but it's all very exciting. Sonia, want to kick us off?
Today, we are talking about mimeographs and other old-school printing technology.
Yes. While researching zines for episode 13, I came across the mimeograph, and then it popped up again when I was researching cosplay for episode 22. Lee Hoffman mimeographed her own costume. And I became curious what a mimeograph was. And then I thought it would be fun to talk about some of the other printing and copying machines which were largely replaced by the Xerox machine or the home printer. And we're going to talk about a selection of them today, and these are not in chronological order.
So let's start with the mimeograph. The mimeograph was a mechanical and later electric machine that was used to make copies. You can make 50 to 100 copies on a mimeograph fairly easily. It works by pressing ink through a stencil onto a piece of paper. The stencil is very clever. It's made from a special sheet of fiber that has a wax coating. Typing or drawing on this sheet with a stylus removes the wax coating and lets the fiber show. Then, ink is pressed through the fiber onto the paper. One stencil would last for 5,000 copies. Then it would deteriorate too much to be legible. With the mimeograph, you can only use one color ink at a time.
The very first mimeograph was made by Thomas Edison in 1876. It was a flat press, so you laid a piece of paper down and pressed on it to make a copy. It used a stencil, but his version included an electric pen which would help you make the stencil. Interestingly, Edison seems to have been inspired by the method of pouncing to invent the mimeograph and pen. And pouncing is the method used to transfer embroidery patterns that we talked about in our episode on Esther Inglis, episode 20. Basically, how it works is you prick tiny holes through a pattern using a pin, and then put the pattern over your fabric and rub it with charcoal dust. And when you remove the pattern, tiny dots of charcoal are left.
In his patent application for the mimeograph, Edison writes, "Patterns for embroidery and for fresco painters have been made of paper, perforated with numerous holes in the lines to be transferred, and the transfer has been done by a fine-colored powder, dusted over and rubbed into such holes while the article is upon the surface that receives such transfer. This is not adapted to writing because the color employed is not permanent, and no means has been devised that could easily be made use of in writing or drawing by hand, with rapidity that rendered the operation practically available for autographic printing." His invention solves these problems. He writes, "My improvement relates, first, to the instrument employed for puncturing the paper, whereby such instrument can be used by hand in the same manner as a drawing or writing pen. Second, to the method of printing by direct transfer in permanent semi-liquid ink from the perforated sheet. And third, to the press for holding such transfer sheet and the paper to be impressed." So his electric pen allows you to puncture the paper while drawing normally, and this creates the stencil. Then, instead of using charcoal or colored powder, he uses a new semi-permanent ink to push through the stencil onto the paper. And finally, there's a special press that holds the transfer sheet or stencil and paper.
Yes, I love that he was inspired by an embroidery pattern transfer method to invent the copy machine.
Yeah, I didn't know that story.
So cool. I was just looking up his patent to see what it said, and then the very first line, they say embroidery.
Wow.
Blew my mind. Albert Blake Dick improved on Edison's design for the mimeograph. In 1887, Dick created his own flatbed duplicator. He incorporated a company, A.B. Dick, and sold this duplicator, which he called the Edison Mimeograph, so he used Edison's name to help sell it. It was a success, and A.B. Dick eventually became the world's largest mimeograph manufacturer. Mimeographs changed over the next few decades. Instead of using a flatbed, they used rollers, and rather than pressing down onto the paper, you turned a crank and rolled the paper through the machine. It still used a stencil. And I watched a great instructional video that was probably used in a secretary training course from San Diego State College in the 1960s. And it showed an electric mimeograph that rolled the paper and stencil through with the flick of a switch. They called this machine a stencil duplicator or mimeogram, and they also said, quote, "You should never go off and leave a machine running."
Good advice. The video also covered a machine called the spirit duplicator, also called a fluid duplicator. This type of copy machine was a direct copier. Instead of a stencil, you make a master using a special piece of paper. This paper was coated in aniline dye, which was alcohol-based and slightly purple. This type of dye was invented in 1856 by William Perkins. To use a spirit duplicator, you first need to create a master copy. Basically, you take a piece of carbon paper, put it on top of the master, then drew or typed your content. You could type out information using a typewriter, and you could also draw freehand or with a stencil using a ballpoint pen. The carbon transferred onto the master. To make copies, you put the master into the spirit duplicator, which looked a lot like a mimeograph. There was a fluid chamber, essentially a small container with water, which dampened the paper through a wick. The dampened paper was pressed against the master, taking off some of the aniline dye and creating a copy. The dye is removed bit by bit from the master, so this limits the number of copies that you can make. A spirit duplicator was typically used to make less than 400 copies, and the copies came out of a machine slightly damp.
And I have to include a small part of the video where the narrator says, quote, "You'll find it easy to make corrections. Here are the 5 steps you would need to do to correct an error while making your master. First, scrape off the error with a blade. Then, coat it with wax using a wax correcting pencil. Next, pick up any, quote, odd pieces of dye with correction putty. Insert a new piece of carbon paper behind the error, type or write your correction, remove the extra carbon, and carry on creating your master." My goodness.
So the hectograph is another copy method that uses aniline dye. It's also known as a jellygraph or gel printing. It was invented in 1869 by a Russian man, Mikhail Alasov. He realized that if you could transfer the ink onto some type of copy pad, you could then lift it up with another sheet of paper. The copy pad is made out of gelatin, although it's described in at least one early publication as glue. In 1870, Alasov produced a pamphlet on how to create a hectograph. In 1878, he brought it to the World's Fair in Paris.
So to make a hectograph, you only need a tray, gelatin, glycerin, and aniline or alcohol-based ink. You mix the gelatin and glycerin with water and put it in the tray. The gel sets and creates the copy pad. Then you draw a master just like in the Spirit duplicator using aniline ink or an aniline-coated sheet. You lay the master onto the gel and let it sit for a minute or two. The ink transfers from the master onto the gel. You peel off the master, then put a new sheet of paper on. The ink transfers onto the new paper, and when you peel it off, you have a copy. And you can make 40 to 60 copies this way.
Researcher Spencer Stewart said in a radio segment for CBC on this topic that the, quote, hectograph didn't win the race in terms of duplicators. The mimeograph and Spirit duplicators were much faster and easier to use. However, because it was made using very simple tools and ingredients, it was used by many underground groups. In fact, the organizers of The Great Escape used a hectograph to copy maps and forge papers. The Great Escape is the title of a book by Paul Chester Brickhill, which later became a movie. It tells the true story of 76 Allied airmen from several different countries who worked together to escape a Nazi prisoner of war camp on March 24th to March 25th, 1944, by digging tunnels over 300 feet long. Desmond Plunkett, a Brit, along with 12 other people, created and used a hectograph.
It's pretty amazing. Here's the story from his obituary in the Daily Telegraph in 2002. By bribing a guard, Plunkett obtained a large and detailed map of Europe, which formed the basis of an eventual supply of some 2,500 maps in 5 colors. He abandoned tracing as being too time-consuming. Instead, he conjured up an ingenious mimeograph, and this word should be hectograph, using gelatin created from the crystal jelly sent in Red Cross parcels. The gelatin was poured into shallow trays made from old food tins bonded together by resin extracted from the ubiquitous fir trees. The ink was derived from the crushed lead of indelible pencils. Plunkett and his team were able to run off not only maps, but also forged passes, permits, and other, quote, official documents devised by Tim Whelan, the Escape Committee's master forger whose, quote, department was known as Dean and Dawson after the travel business. Between them, Plunkett and Whelan came up with the essential kit for the Great Escape, which took place on March 23, 1944, after the tunnel diggers had made the most of Sagan's light sandy soil and forced an exit beyond the wire. Sagan was the location of the POW camp. The tunnel, which had been a year in the making, was 360 feet long and some 30 feet beneath the surface. At his own request, no one else would volunteer for the unlucky number. Plunkett was the 13th man to crawl to freedom. And I think this is the most exciting use of print technology.
I agree. That's great. I remember we watched that movie a long time ago.
I didn't see it. I'm going to go back and watch it.
Yeah, it's good. It's a good movie.
Yeah.
We'll have to rewatch it to see if they use the...
We'll have to see if they use a hectograph in the movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. The hectograph was also used by Russian workers who began to organize in the late 1800s, and it was used to print early fanzines in the 1930s in the U.S. And people still do this today. A company called Gelli Arts, spelled Gelli, has a modern method for gel printing. On their website, they say, quote, "We love gelatin printing and we've developed a better way to do it." And their gel is made with mineral oil and a hypoallergenic polymer.
Next, we'll talk about perhaps the most famous print machine to die, the Gocco. Save Gocco was a big online movement in the early days of the craft blogging scene, but we'll get to that in a minute. Gocco is a small machine that you can use at home. It was originally created to print greeting cards. It was invented in the 1970s in Japan by the Rizzo Kogaku Corporation, and it was essentially a small screen printer with a clever innovation. So briefly, screen printing is a method of transferring ink to fabric, paper, or other flat surfaces. The screen refers to a mesh that is printed with an image to create a stencil. Then, the screen is laid over paper or fabric, and ink is pressed through the screen with a squeegee. The method originated in China in the late 900s, early 1000s. At first, stiff brushes were used to transfer designs to fabric, and now we use squeegees to press the ink through. Today, screens are typically created using a photo emulsion technique. You print your image onto a transparency and place it onto a screen coated with light-sensitive emulsion ink. This has to dry in the dark. Then you expose the screen to light. The unexposed parts around the image are washed away. You need one screen for each different color in your design. The Gocco's clever innovation is that it allowed you to create the screen inside the printer itself using a flash from a special light bulb.
The company that would create the Gocco was founded in 1946 by Noboru Hayama. He originally started a mimeograph company called Rizzo Shaw at his home in Tokyo. 2 years later, he opened a printing company called the Rizzo Printing Company, which had 5 employees. The printing company grew and became a print service that offered typing and printing using machines that Hayama imported from the UK. And these were probably spirit duplicators. However, the company also did a lot of research and development. Rizzo Ink was created in 1954 to manufacture ink, and in 1955, the company established Rizzo Science Laboratory Limited, essentially to invent more printing technology. In 1958, they created the first Rizzograph, a mimeograph printer for letters. They invented better versions of other parts of the mimeographing process, including a lasting stencil and a special stencil for typing. And the Rizzo Kagaku Corporation was created in 1967. The company also built a large manufacturing plant in Kasumigawara. And in 1967, they invented the last piece of the Gocco puzzle, the thermal duplicator. This was a stencil maker that used heat to transfer the design to the stencil.
In 1977, the company created the Print Gocco B6. Again, this was a home printer intended for greeting cards that used thermal duplication to make the stencil inside the printer. You drew your design, inserted it into the Gocco, pushed a button to flash a bulb that created enough heat to transfer the design to the screen, and then you could print your image. You could print in multiple colors by stamping one color at a time. The effect was slightly imperfect, so the prints are very charming. In 1978, the company created the B5, which was slightly larger.
And as a slight sidetrack, this company also created the Rizzograph in 1980. So we mentioned an early Rizzograph, which was a typing mimeograph machine. However, there is another machine, also called the Rizzograph, which was created in 1980, that is a larger scale way of doing digital screen printing. So using a machine that looks like a copier, you can scan an image. The machine creates masters, which are like the screens in screen printing, and then it prints them onto paper using a method similar to the one the mimeograph used. The method produces slightly imperfect prints in multiple colors, and again, it's very charming, and people still make Rizzograph prints today.
The Gocco was popular in Japan and abroad. Over 10 million were sold from 1977 to the early 2000s. However, once home printers came along, the demand for Goccos dropped. On December 12, 2005, the company announced that they would stop manufacturing the Gocco, and this sparked a huge response in the U.S. Joe Bliss, a designer and craft blogger and the owner of Blissin.com, created a site called SaveGocco.com, and you can still see this website on the Internet Archive. It had a very cute Save Gocco logo that looked like it had been printed on the Gocco machine. She started a petition and encouraged people to send Gocco printed postcards to the president of the company, who at the time was Akira Hayama.
And the website itself is a very early 2000s website. All of the updates, including the name of the president of the company, are all in lower caps. That was like a cool thing to do in early blogging, just never use capital letters.
There was a Save Gocco art show in Boston, and the movement got a lot of press. It was written up in articles in the Detroit Metro Times, Craft Magazine, and the New York Times Magazine. However, the company stopped manufacturing Goccos in 2008.
Bliss described the Gocco as a combination of screen printing and rubber stamping. She called the machine, quote, a clean, easy, and fully self-contained compact system that exposes and prints all in one unit. And I think that this time of digital change, when people were starting to blog more, made people nostalgic for a non-digital technology. Maybe the Gocco symbolized the end of print, as so much of what we used to print moved online, like flyers and posters. And because the Gocco was so small and easy to use, a lot of people had it, unlike, say, a mimeograph. So this push to save Gocco reminds me a little of how the Victorians started collecting handmade lace when lace machines became more widespread, which we talked about in episode 9, lace. The Rizzo Kagaku Corporation still manufactures a variety of Rizzographs and copy machines. And in 2011, they launched the Gocco Pro 100, a digital screen maker. And this technology seems similar to the Gocco. It allows you to make the screen right in the printer. However, you create the image on a computer screen. And Jill Bliss is still an artist. So that is a variety of defunct print technology. Sonia, what do you think?
I thought that was very interesting. It really runs the gambit on where it was used and how it was used. And I mean, everybody was printing.
Yeah, there were so many different machines. They used similar but different technologies. I liked how the ink from one made the other one possible. Basically, the hectograph inventor realized that the ink just had to be put on something to be transferred. So,
I wonder if there were big patent races for these things.
With the sewing machine and the
everyone's kind of working on it on the same problem.
That is a great question. Now I need to go watch The Great Escape.
Oh, yeah.
Because I think it's just fascinating that they were so resourceful and amazing. And I love that this moment of print technology was the one that they needed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very good movie. I'm down to watch it again. Also, I was like, we can make a hectograph.
We can make a hectograph.
It's achievable.
Yeah.
So I think that would be fun to try.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's make a hectograph and watch The Great Escape.
That sounds like a wonderful afternoon.
Well, thank you so much for listening. If you have a comment, question, or suggestion, you can email us at handmadehistoryhosts, that's HOSTS, @gmail.com.
You can also visit our website at handmadehistorypodcast.com and check out our Patreon page and sign up for our free posts at the link in our show notes.
And you can pre-order our first ever collaboration kit with MCreativeJ at the link in the show notes also. Join us for our Stumpwork Embroidery Stitch-Along in March. Thank you for listening.
Bye.
Bye.
And this creates this
sentence. That's horrible. While drawing yours. Okay, I'm done.